Go.
Okay, here we are, just moved slightly over at the edge of the water in Battery Park. Behind me we have Pier A. In the distance you can see a little bit better now Ellis Island. And then behind me directly, which is why we're this close to the water, is my favorite memorial in the whole park. This park is full of memorials to the Korean War, memorials to World War II, memorials to veterans, memorials to a whole bunch of wonderful things that you should definitely take a look at, walk around the park later on. But this one is something that most people miss. It's right here in the water itself. It's the Merchant Mariners Memorial, and I think it's the most dramatic and the most elegant of all of the memorials in this park. Aside from one, which I'll tell you about in a minute, possibly. This memorial is a bronze sculpture of merchant mariners who participated in and greatly supported the war efforts in World War II, but in many different conflicts. And this actual statue is based on a photograph taken by a German sailor, who had just sunk an American ship. And the American merchant mariners were sinking and signaling for help and signaling for someone to come rescue them. And then in the photograph itself that this is based on, there's a man sinking into the water, just being grasped by his comrades. And the thing that I love about this exact statue is that it interacts with the water, it interacts with the landscape. So as the tide rises, the man down in the water, his fate becomes even more tenuous. The water comes up just over his face and just down. Right now it's low tide, and so the water's down here around his knees, and so it's a little bit less risky, but it's by far the most dramatic presentation of the very dangerous job that these men did in service of the country. Behind me on this side we have Pier A, which is currently being restored and is a good way to see what all of the piers would have looked like that, like I said before, would have proceeded up the west side of the island. This is the only one on this side that's remaining, and they're restoring it to look like its original condition, and hopefully in another year or two you'll be able to actually go look at it. Behind you, though, is the possibly second most dramatic memorial. Not that the things that are being memorialized are not dramatic and meaningful, but that sometimes the memorial themselves doesn't really do justice to the thing that it's commemorating. Right behind you guys there is the sculpture that would have been in the plaza in front of the Twin Towers. And right off to my left and your right we have the Freedom Tower, which you can see right up there at the end of, right in the middle of West Street. And like I said before, that would have been right on the edge of the land. This statue right behind you, this sculpture, stood for many years, which is actually, we'll see in a minute, it stood for many years in front of the Twin Towers. And then when the Twin Towers collapsed, and rubble and pieces of building and cement and equipment and burning ash and everything else fell on top of it, it was crushed and into something that doesn't quite resemble its original intent, but actually made it into something far more dramatic. The mangled remains of this statue sort of stand as a tribute to the crushed but not broken spirit of commerce and of the people of the city, but also of the people of the world. I want to also take this moment to talk about the Freedom Tower and the World Trade Center itself before we go past it. We're not going to go all the way over directly to that site, which I recommend you do on your own time. It's definitely worth a visit, but it might, to do it justice, it might take you a half an hour or an hour of time, and we don't have that kind of time on our tour. We'd miss out on too many things. The Freedom Tower, which you can see really beautifully from here, that's almost completed, is being constructed to be 1,776 feet high. Anybody want to guess the significance of that number? So 1776, obviously the Declaration of Independence, we picked that number as the new height of the Freedom Tower, symbolically sort of reasserting our new destiny, or reasserting our confidence as a country. The Twin Towers originally stood there, and they frankly were not particularly an architectural marvel. They were an engineering marvel, but when they stood there, they really weren't that beautiful. The new Freedom Tower is a much more elegant design, so that's also a testament to rebuilding in a better, improved way. So a brief note about the original towers. Constructed in the 1970s, Generally, people didn't like them when they were built. They were massively unpopular. They were pretty ugly. The only thing that was impressive about them was really that there were two of them. If there was only one, frankly, it would just be a big block, kind of boring, and when they were first unveiled, people were unimpressed. Not only that, but because there was thousands of square feet of new office space, it kind of ruined the property values in the whole city. And so landlords weren't able to make as much money. There was massive economic problems that happened to coincide with it. There's a famous thing called the skyscraper index, which says that right after the tallest building is built, the economy is going to crash. And that definitely has stood true for New York. The Empire State Building was built, and then we had the collapse in the 1930s, the Great Depression, and the original World Trade Center towers were built, and then we entered into a massive recession. One thing, though, changed people's attitude about these towers, and that was a gentleman named Philippe Petit, an artist and performer from France. He had this dream, this idea, from the day that he first heard about the Twin Towers, of stringing a high wire between the two buildings, way up in the air, and then walking from one to the other as a giant publicity stunt, and also as just sort of guerrilla art. Performance for the sake of performance, and using the city as his landscape. So he completely illegally broke into the building, got up there, got the wire set up. I don't know how he got it set up from one building to the other, but he'd been planning it for months, so I'm sure he knew what he was doing. He got it strung up there, and he walked across back and forth for over 30 minutes to an hour. And people down on the sidewalk watching it just were massively impressed with this. I mean, look at the Freedom Tower up there. It's way the heck up in the air. Imagine the Twin Towers being virtually that high, and then having a guy walking across way up in the sky. It's absolutely terrifying. I'm not even sure I want to go up to the observation tower when this thing is finished, because it's so far up there. But this guy was up on a skinny little wire, going back and forth. So the police come to arrest him, right? He's trespassing, he's breaking all kinds of laws. But what police officer is going to go out onto the high wire to arrest him? I'm not going to do it. Are you going to do it? It's crazy. So eventually, you know, he taunted the police for a while. He jumped up and down. He laid down on the wire, goofing around. But eventually he had to come down. He gets to the roof of the building. The police promptly arrest him and charge him with all kinds of violations and misdemeanors and whatnot. But the owners of the building, the managers of the property, who were sitting on thousands of square feet of unoccupied real estate, they begged, please don't press charges, please don't punish this guy. This is the best publicity we could ever ask for. So, as they said, this is the best publicity possible, and immediately the Twin Towers sort of found a spot in New Yorkers' heart. They sort of came to encapsulate what the city stood for. And for many years afterwards, that was the symbol, the skyline of New York with the Twin Towers in there was iconic of the city. And Mr. Petit, his punishment, well, the police compromised and he ended up being sentenced to do community service for no fee in Central Park, doing high wire acts for children. The new Freedom Tower, I've heard some locals, wow, that's loud. Hold on a sec. Alright, well, it's going to be a while. I've heard a lot of locals say to me that I just moved to Battery Park myself, so I live here, and so the locals who live here, who experienced 9/11 and the whole aftermath, being directly right here present, they like to say that the Freedom Tower is kind of a very New York solution. It's only one building, but it's kind of like, pardon me, but a middle finger to the world, saying, you know, what could be more New York than that? Screw you, world. We're going to go on with the way we think we got to do stuff. We're going to go on with business, and we're going to get better and more prosperous and make more money and better than we ever were before. And the new Freedom Tower, just like the old World Trade Towers, are something for everyone to share. Personally, I experienced the tragedy of 9/11. I actually was living abroad. I was living in Italy at the time. And I experienced the whole thing from abroad, watching on TV, like many of you probably did, from far away, from somewhere that was not right here on the ground. But what that taught me and what it really symbolizes for all of us is that it was an experience for everyone in the world. I wasn't right here that day, but all the people that I was around in Italy, they shared that experience with us, because the World Trade Center was just that. It was world trade that was being attacked, and so all of us were being attacked. And the new Freedom Tower is the Freedom Tower for everyone. Yes, it has 1776 feet in it, which is American.